4-year-old who was playing in a backyard shed and was bitten by a bat, or a vampire, 2 hours ago. There are 2 small marks on the side of her neck.
All right, you have your scenario. Let's go ahead and get started. Grab your tape or whatever your cheat sheet is. Always remember, red to the head and head to the heel. You can clearly see this little one falls into the zone. And Scott, for your quick tip.
So bites. When it comes to bites, parents are convinced that if their little kid is bit by something, that unless you rush them straight back from triage to the first available bed, that they're going to drop dead in the waiting room from rabies. But what you need to remember about rabies is a couple things. The first of which is if there's an exposure and it's treated reasonably quickly, meaning preferably that day or within at least a couple of days. Actually, the outcomes are great. So with that in mind, who are we not worried when little kids get bit? Well, happily, the vast majority of animals that attack little kids, you do not get rabies. Meaning hamsters, gerbils, goldfish, girlfriends, the typical things that attack little kids, you do not get rabies. So if we don't worry about the animals that regularly attack little kids, who should we worry about? Depends on where you are. Interestingly, outside of the United States, dogs are actually a big concern. However, here in the United States proper, raccoons and bats are where it's at. And depending on where you're at in the country will define whether you're more worried about bats or raccoons. So outside the United States, all three, but here in the United States, bats and raccoons is where it's at. Now, technically, there's 3 categories of exposure, but that's too much to remember. Because in the ER, we really only care about a couple of things. The first of which is, remember, the treatment is anything but pleasant. First of which, you get rabies immune globulin. Depending on how much you weigh, it's injected directly into the bite and into another body area or 2 as well. In addition to the rabies immune globulin, you also get introduced to rabies vaccine on day 0, day 3, day 7, day 14. So what that comes down to, though, for many of us is a couple things. Number 1, it's a whole lot of shots. Number 2, remember, normally in kids, if we're going to have to give them a shot, we load everything up into one syringe so that we only have to give them 1 shot. Can you do that with rabies? And the answer is no. It has to be at least 2 separate shots with 2 separate needles in 2 separate sites. The 2 drugs do not mix in the same syringe. Now, take that 1 step further, and that's since pediatrics begins with P, prevention, you remember from pediatrics, is where it's at. So how do we prevent little kids from playing with animals they shouldn't? And the answer is actually reasonably simple. And that's, as a profession, we simply need to bring back the urban legend. The urban legend, some of y'all remember growing up hearing about the kid down the block who got rabies shots. And where did the kid down the block get rabies shots? You remember was in the stomach. And how big was the needle? It was like 3 feet long. And as a kid, if you knew that you were gonna get 32 shots in the stomach with a needle that was 3 feet long, did you play with animals you shouldn't? Absolutely not. Bring back the legend.